Hello my lovely little gemstones, it's Zafira, and today I'm going to be reading a few one-shots I've written for my Standersides Demigod AU blog. I'll be reading the first 5 here, and you can find the time codes for each individual one-shot down in the description below. Welcome to Camp HalfBlood, Part 1. The old SUV rumbled its way down the uneven road, carrying 2 terrified half-bloods and 1 equally terrified satyr guardian escorting them. They had spent the very last of their money on this ride to a place their guardian claimed it would be safe. They'd believe it when they saw it. Logan watched the land slip by as they drove, his chin resting in his hand and his other hand being held tightly by his best friend. He absently rubbed his thumb over Virgil's knuckles, who was curled tightly into a ball in his seat, holding onto his backpack like a teddy bear. "So, where are you kids heading exactly anyways? Not much around these parts, far as I know," the driver asked them. He was a large man, with an impressive beard and tattoos spiraling down both of his arms. His voice rumbled in his chest, and it reminded Logan of his father. Talon cleared their throat nervously. Well, my family has a summer home out here. We're coming out to clean it up and, get it ready for everyone later this week." The driver hummed. "You know, I don't get too many requests to come out this way, but anytime I do, it's always kids around your age. I've heard quite a few wild tales over the past few years. This like a gated community or something? Sounds like there's always a party going on." Logan was sitting directly behind Talon, but he could see how they were fidgeting in their seat. Yeah, kinda. I guess you could say that. You can actually drop us off here." They pointed at a point a little ways up the road, and their driver pulled over, raising an eyebrow. "You sure? This is quite a ways from the address you gave me. I can take you kids further." Talon shook their head, already digging in their pockets for the money. "No, it's fine. This is a shortcut. Besides, we could use the fresh air. Right, guys?" Talon turned back to look at the boys, who slowly nodded. Finally, they managed to rustle the money out of their ill-fitting jeans pocket, but the rest of their pocket's contents spilled out with it. Talon swore and dove to catch the fallen items, but one landed at the driver's feet, and he picked it up. Logan saw what he had in his hands, and he froze. In his large hands, he held a single golden coin with a caduceus stamped on the front. "This is some coin you've got here, kid." Talon swiped it out of his grasp and shoved it back in their pocket, scrambling to open the car door. "Yeah, it's a family heirloom. Thank you for the ride. Come on, guys, let's go." The two caught the panicked tone in their voice and followed suit, Virgil nearly falling flat on his face as his legs got pins and needles. The small boy shuffled over to his friends, bumping his arm against Logan after he slipped his backpack on. The older boy nudged him back, offering his hand. Virgil took it gratefully. "Thank you," Talon called as the driver pulled away, turning around and heading back the way they came. Virgil waited until the car had pulled over the horizon before running his fingers through his messy hair. "What was that, Talon? I thought we had enough money to get us all the way there." "He was asking too many questions. Mortals don't know about camp, and it's safer for everyone that way," Talon answered, still breathing shallowly. Virgil groaned. "I guess, but now we have to walk?" "We've walked longer distance than this. We can make it. Talon, how far are we from this camp, anyways?" Logan asked their guide. Talon pointed to a hill on the near horizon with a single tree on it. "That hill with the tree. Memorize it. You'll always be safe as long as you're on the other side of that hill." The trio started down the path, with Talon leading the way and the 2 young half-bloods following behind, hand in hand. As they approached the hill, they noticed there was a person lying underneath its branches. They were dressed up, with a gray dress shirt, black pants, and shoes. A bowler hat was resting over their face, and they wore bright yellow gloves on their hands. Their footsteps woke the stranger, who glanced curiously at them before getting to their feet, brushing the dirt off their pants. Their hair fell over the left side of their face, and the brim of their hat cast a shadow over their eyes. "Talon, you made it, and with 2 healthy half-bloods, no less. Perfect. They were starting to get hungry." Who was? Logan found himself asking. The stranger, who they could now tell was a young boy probably about their age, grinned, and were those fangs in his mouth? "Why, the monsters in the woods, of course. We have to feed them regularly, otherwise they tend to come looking for a meal. It took forever to clean up last time." Virgil took a step back, and Logan held out a protective arm in front of him. Talon, however, wasn't intimidated, putting their hands on their hips and leaning into the kid's space. "They just got here. What do you think you're doing, scaring them already? Where's Picani? I told him we would be here today." The stranger grinned wildly again, snickering. "Oh, but their faces were priceless! How could I pass up an opportunity like this? Picani's in the big house. He said I should take the 2 new half-bloods on a tour while you go and meet up with him and report. Sound good?" Talon wavered slightly, looking back and hesitating. "I was going to show them around." "Oh, come on. Don't you trust me? I know this camp like the back of my hand." They sighed. "All right, but no scaring them anymore." Talon turned back to Virgil and Logan. I'll see you guys at dinner. Virgil started after them, but Talon was much faster than him, and he realized he wasn't going to catch them. The satyr passed by their new guide and disappeared. Virgil and Logan gasped and ran forward to catch them. Instead, they stumbled through an invisible wall of some kind, and all of a sudden the plain strawberry fields that were there before were populated with buildings. They saw Talon bounding towards the largest building in the middle. Before they could follow, the strange kid stepped in front of them and spread his arms out in a sweeping gesture. With the motion, his head tilted up and his hair fell to the side, revealing glittering green scales and a pink scar sweeping from the corner of his mouth all the way up to his ear. Congratulations! You've survived the trip here. Now you get to learn all about how weird you really are. Welcome to Camp HalfBlood. A tour of camp. Who are you? Virgil asked cautiously, shoulders hunched. The camper snickered, showing off his teeth. Yes, there were definitely fangs there, or at the very least, extremely long canines. Either way, it made him look devious and just a little intimidating. You can call me D. Now then, should we get to it? Like I said, the monsters are getting hungry. Logan huffed. You said you were going to show us around this camp. I, for one, have many questions that I want answers to. Dee held a gloved hand over his heart, raising his eyebrows. You're rather forward, aren't you? What is this place? Talon told us it's a safe place for kids like us, but they never elaborated what that meant. Dee didn't seem surprised, but he did roll his eyes. They wouldn't have. The more you know, the bigger a target it paints on your back. But you're here now, so I'll tell you everything. Something about Dee's tone put Virgil on edge. It was something about how he pronounced his words. His S's were more drawn out, and he couldn't tell if it was natural or an act he was putting on. The scales decorating the side of his face that his hair was covering made him pretty sure it was the former. Dee turned and started down the hill, gesturing to the buildings ahead of them. This is Camp HalfBlood, a safe place for demigods like us. If you're here, it means you've managed to survive until this point. Congrats! You're some of the lucky few who live long enough to get this far. HalfBlood. That's what Talon called us, but I still have a hard time believing we're half god. Don't let it get to your head, kid. You're just as mortal as anyone else. The god half is nothing but trouble. Believe me. His tone went dark for a moment. Logan either didn't notice or didn't care to comment, wrinkling his nose. Kid, you're not that much older than us, and my name is Logan. Dee hummed. Fine. And you? Dee glanced at Virgil. The shorter one sneered, tugging his hoodie strings and staring at the ground. None of your business. Dee stopped in front of the large building that seemed to be central to the camp. He turned to them, gesturing to the building. Nickname it is. All right, Logan and the Brendan Urie wannabe, your tour starts here. The big house. If you're here, you're either half dead or in trouble. The HalfBloods glanced up nervously at the three-story building. It looked innocent enough, the light blue paint giving it a calming feeling. Dee started snickering. You two are so gullible! I'm kidding! Kind of. Logan rolled his eyes, crossing his arms with a huff. Would you mind just stating things simply? We're confused enough as it is. Oh, come on. I never get to show the newbies around. I've got to have some fun while I can. What is this building? Virgil asked pointedly. It's administrative. It's got the infirmary, trophy room, Pecani's rooms, and the rec room. That's where all the head counselors meet to discuss important matters that the rest of us aren't privy to. Actually, they might be in there now, come to think of it. Dee tapped his chin, thinking. Logan adjusted his glasses, careful of the broken bridge on his nose. Head counselor? Logan questioned. I'll show you the cabins. It'll be easier to explain then. Dee led them past the big house, towards the cluster of smaller buildings that were arranged in the shape of a Greek letter omega. Logan had noticed it when they were up on the hill looking over the camp. He shook his head, confused. How did he know that? He'd never studied Greek in school, and it wasn't exactly common knowledge. He didn't have time to ponder it as Dee started talking. These are the cabins. There's one for each major god, and recently we've started building them for every god. Whether you're here for the summer or all year round, you stay in your godly parents' cabin. Who's our godly parent, then? Virgil ventured, breaking his silence. Dee tilted his head back to look over his shoulder, shrugging. Dunno. You've got to be claimed by them first. Until then, you get to stay with us in the Hermes cabin. We take anyone who hasn't been claimed yet, as well as our own. Dee opened his arms in a welcoming gesture, though Virgil felt anything but welcomed. And how long does that take? Logan asked, and if he didn't know any better, he'd say he saw Dee's shoulders tense. There's no way to know. Some kids are claimed the moment they step across the border to camp. Others take a few days, and others take weeks. The only rule is that you have to be claimed by or on your 15th birthday. How do you make gods follow a rule like that? Virgil asked, skeptical. Dee huffed. So many questions. A few years ago, there was a big quest that some half-bloods went on. They saved the gods from destruction, so they told them they could ask for anything. They'd even swear on the river Styx for it. Instead of asking for immortality or something like that, they asked for 2 things. Dee held up 2 fingers, counting off. First, we had to have cabins here at camp for every god, not just the major 12. And second, they had to claim their children by the time we turned 15. Since the war kinda started because campers felt abandoned, it's not too surprising that's what they asked for. Virgil and Logan shared a glance as Dee kept talking. Even so, we've been getting less campers coming in every year. You 2 are the first this summer. Logan narrowed his eyes. Why is that? Dee shrugged, absently scratching at the scaled skin on the left side of his face. Dunno. Could be because they don't want to come to camp, or because they don't make it all the way. Virgil shuddered, not liking how nonchalant Dee said it. Don't joke about shit like that. It's not easy living that way, especially with those monsters. Oh, you actually fought something? Impressive, Dee said, not sounding the least bit impressed. Anyways, cabins. Like I said, you'll be with us in the Hermes cabin until you get claimed, and then you'll move in with your half-siblings, and you'll have a new head counselor. That's just the oldest person in the cabin. So you're the head counselor of the Hermes cabin, then, Logan clarified, and Dee snorted. As if. Who wants that much responsibility? That means I would have to go to those boring meetings and make sure everyone's where they should be. It's like being a babysitter. No thank you. It sounded almost rehearsed, the way he rattled off the reasons. The other half-bloods just sighed in relief. Dee was already getting on their nerves with his flippant remarks and confusing explanations. So where is the actual head counselor? Shouldn't he be giving us this tour instead? Virgil asked, tugging his hood over his head. Dee rolled his eyes. Don't you listen? He's in a meeting. Now come on, we want to be done with this before dinner. Dee started walking past the cabins, and Virgil and Logan shared a look before slowly following after. They would endure this, and then hopefully they could talk to some people who would give them actual answers about who they are and what exactly they were supposed to do here. The Armory, Part 1. Virgil and Logan followed Dee all over the campgrounds, half listening as he explained different camp activities with the same smug air. Their last stop was a simple-looking shed. Dee opened the door, and the half-bloods behind him gasped at the sight they were met with. Weapons lined the walls and laid in piles on the floor. Swords, shields, lances, daggers, some in sheaths, most laying out in the open and letting off a soft glow that didn't seem to be just a reflection of the sunlight. Logan stepped inside and grabbed his sword leaning open against the wall, examining the strange glow. Celestial bronze. All our weapons are made from it. I'm sure you realize that you can't kill monsters with normal metal, right? Dee answered Logan's question before he could ask it. Celestial bronze is mined on Mount Olympus. It slices monsters to dust, but leaves mortals completely unharmed. Does that include us? Virgil asked, glaring at Dee. He snickered, putting his hand on his hip. Planning on taking me out, are you? You couldn't land a scratch on me if you tried. Dee's smug tone broke the floodgates holding back his anger. Virgil's head snapped up and he stalked towards Dee, glaring at him with a storm swirling in his eyes. Stop acting like you know us. You have no fucking idea what we've been through and what we're capable of. Just because you've been here longer than us doesn't give you the right to be an asshole about it, Virgil growled, pointing a finger in Dee's face. The other camper looked unimpressed, his one eye not flinching from his bored expression. He reached up and pushed Virgil's hand away, holding onto his wrist so he couldn't step away. His mouth quirked in an amused grin. Let me guess. You spent your whole entire life feeling like there was something wrong with you. You could never focus in school, and your parents were always disappointed in you. So you ran away when school and everything else got to be too much. Mom and Dad probably didn't even care enough to put out a missing child alert. Who knows? Maybe they were even happy you left. Virgil was shaking with rage. He wanted to punch him, but something was pinning him in place. He was frozen, unable to move his limbs. Dee wasn't done talking yet either. He raised his chin, looking down at Virgil with barely veiled anger. You were happy on your own. You felt free for the first time in your life, without someone constantly breathing down your neck. And then Talon found you, and brought you here. And now you have to live with the fact that you're not, and have never been normal. He smiled at Virgil, turning around. You're not special for suffering, kid. Life sucks, and life as a half-blood sucks more. The sooner you realize that, the sooner it'll be to deal with. Pick out your weapons. I'll be waiting outside. Dee stepped out and around the side of the shed, disappearing from their sight. Virgil felt whatever spell he was under break, and he grabbed a fistful of his sweatshirt to cover his mouth so the scream he let out wasn't too loud. Logan put down the sword in his hands and reached out to Virgil, rubbing his shoulder slowly. He watched as Virgil took long, deep breaths, his eyes screwed closed. I hate him. I know. I'm going to slit his stupid throat. Maybe try something a little more subtle. Blood is a pain to clean up. Logan droned. His mouth twitched as Virgil glared at him. I'm kidding. Yeah, I figured. Where does he get off talking to people like that? How has someone not clocked him for it yet? Who says someone hasn't? Perhaps under those long layers he's hiding dozens of scars from people just like you who didn't appreciate his version of honesty. Logan tried to cheer him up, and Virgil cracked a small smile. Anyways, why don't we put that out of our minds for the moment and start looking around? We'll finally have a way to protect ourselves from those monsters. Virgil nodded, letting out a breath and releasing most of his anger with it. Dee had been trying to rile him up. He wouldn't give him that satisfaction again. The two half-bloods began looking around, grabbing celestial bronze weapons at random. They didn't know how, but when they held a sword or dagger in their hands, they could tell instantly if it was right for them or not. There was a feeling each one gave off, similar yet incredibly different at the same time. Virgil found a dagger sitting against one of the walls, and as soon as he unsheathed it, he knew it was the right one. It felt comfortable, his fingers curling around the grip like it was made for him. It wasn't too heavy or too light, and he twirled it in his fingers like he'd practiced it his whole life. A small smile grew on his face. Found it, he muttered. Logan glanced up from where he was kneeling when he heard his friend's voice, and he nodded as Virgil showed it off. He stood up, holding something small in his hands. I think I found something as well. Why do you suppose someone left a pen in here? Logan asked, holding up the pen in question. It looked like a simple ballpoint pen, cheap and disposable. Virgil stepped closer, shrugging. Dunno, someone must have dropped it, he offered, but Logan pursed his lips. That was possible, but there was something about this pen. Logan clicked it, and before he could process what had happened, the pen grew in his hand. In an instant, Logan was holding a lance, the tip glinting dangerously in the afternoon sun leaking into the shed. Whoa, how'd you do that? Virgil breathed. Logan shook his head, examining the lance carefully. I'm not sure. It was a pen a moment ago. Well, can you turn it back? Logan chewed his lip, feeling along the handle for any kind of switch. Eventually he found a thin groove near the bottom of the weapon and a button hidden inside. When he clicked it, the lance shrunk back into an innocent-looking pen, the perfect size to fit in his pocket. Virgil eyed the pen carefully, then down his own dagger. Slowly, a smile fought its way onto his face. Finally. Next time that asshole makes some snarky remark, he's getting stabbed. Logan chuckled, putting a hand on Virgil's shoulder and leading him out of the shed. He knew Virgil was kidding, but he vowed to keep an eye on him when Dee was around. Just in case. The campfire. Talon found Virgil and Logan at the campfire after dinner, and they apologized for leaving the two of them so soon after they got to camp. Virgil grumbled, but they forgave Talon when they saw the look on their face. So, what do you think of camp so far? Talon asked, hands clasped in front of them. Are we really going to have to climb that rock wall? Virgil asked immediately, fidgeting with the sleeves of his jacket that was tied around his waist. It doesn't seem very safe. Many of the activities we were shown look very dangerous. Talon shrugged. That's kind of the point. It's so you can practice protecting yourselves, so if you get in a real battle, you're prepared. Is it true there are monsters in the woods? Logan added, remembering Dee mentioning them when they first met. Talon nodded, waving their hands in front of them. There are, but don't take what Dee said seriously. Hardly anyone ever gets eaten by them. That's reassuring, Logan said slowly, and Virgil shook his head, rolling his shoulders back. I hate him. He acts all high and mighty, like he knows everything. Where does he get off talking to us like that? Talon opened their mouth to answer, but another voice cut them off. Don't let him get to you. He just wants attention. The two half-bloods turned to see another kid walking up to them. He was small, shorter than Virgil by a good margin, and thin and wiry. His camp t-shirt was baggy on him, and he had it rubber-banded at the bottom into a tail. Despite his unassuming appearance, he held an air of positive confidence as he smiled at Virgil and Logan. Nice to meet you two. I'm Michael, head of the Hermes cabin. I would have taken you two on the tour today, but I had a meeting that took up most of the day. Welcome to camp. Virgil subconsciously shifted towards Logan, comforting himself with the other's sturdy presence. Is he always like that? Or was he extra charming for us? He sneered. Michael shrugged sheepishly. That's just how he is. Dee's been at camp a long time, longer than most of us. He does whatever he can to get entertainment. Solomon! The four of them flinched at the shrill scream that came from the other side of the bonfire. Virgil and Logan looked between Talon and Michael for answers, but they just shared a look with each other and sighed. What did he do to her this time? Michael mumbled, watching as the crowd of kids parted like the sea, revealing a livid girl with murky seaweed green hair. She scanned the faces in the crowd, finally landing on her target as he hid a growing smirk behind his gloved hand. Those who had been standing near him wisely vacated the area as she stomped towards Dee, brandishing a hairbrush like a knife. "Whatever is the matter, Gabrielle?" Dee asked, innocence dripping from his voice. The girl snarled at him, flicking her wrist and throwing the hairbrush at Dee's head, which he caught without flinching. "Oh, is this for me? How kind of you. You scaly bastard! What the hell did you do to that hairbrush? Look at my hair!" Dee smiled up at her, twirling the brush between his fingers. "Oh, did you do something to it? I hadn't noticed." Gabby looked like she was about to explode. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something the 4 onlookers couldn't see, but a moment later they saw the glint of metal and telling gasp as Gabby swung at Dee's head. The other camper ducked, rolling to the side and coming up in a crouch, holding a short knife he'd hidden who knows where. The sudden action had thrown his hat off his head, and the scales on his face glinted in the flickering firelight. Without it, Virgil and Logan could see that the scales crept up into his hairline, and his brown hair grew in patches around the scales. The teens stared at each other, murder in their eyes, when suddenly the crowd parted again, and the sound of hooves could be heard. "What is going on here? The campfire is a time for community. I will not have any fighting here." The teens released their fighting stances and put their weapons away, though they didn't take their eyes off each other. "Pecani, look at this! Look what he did to my hair!" Gabby whined at the newcomer, a tall centaur whose human torso was wearing a sweater vest, pink tie, and wide-rimmed glasses. He huffed a sigh, looking down at the two of them with mild annoyance. "Yes, it's quite green, isn't it? All right, you two. Big house, now. Thomas, Talon, would you mind joining us?" Talon jumped, scampering over to the centaur. From across the fire, the other 3 saw another teen stand up and walk over to them. Calmly, Dee retrieved his hat from the ground before they departed, heading towards the administrative building. The kids were quiet for just a moment before low murmurs began to run through the crowd. Michael sighed, rubbing his eyes. "What just happened?" Virgil asked, slightly in shock. "Is that normal?" Logan ventured, noting how nonchalant everyone seemed to be about the situation. Michael turned to them, an annoyed look stuck on his face. "Yeah, those two have been at each other's throats for as long as I can remember. Don't ask me why, 'cause I don't know. I'm starting to think they don't even remember either, but every day it's something new. Poor Pecani." Then he smiled, shoulders bouncing in a carefree way. "Oh well, I'll deal with that later. Come on, I'll introduce you to everyone else before we start the sing-along." Logan and Virgil exchanged a worried glance. "Sing-along?" A quiet night. Logan was exhausted. It was hard to believe that just this morning he'd been in a car, being driven to a camp that he'd never seen before. The moment they'd been excused from the campfire, Logan trudged back to the Hermes cabin and collapsed onto his bed, barely having the energy to remove his broken glasses before he fell into a dreamless sleep. Several hours later, Logan was stirred by the softest of noises, a footfall pattern that he was intimately familiar with, and the sound of the squeaky cabin door slowly being opened, as the person carefully inched it to avoid making too much noise. Logan cracked an eye open and looked to his right. As he'd thought, Virgil wasn't in bed. Logan sighed softly, reaching out blindly to find his glasses. His friend had always been a light sleeper, and no doubt this cabin full of people was overwhelming for him. Virgil probably just needed some time alone. But the thought of Virgil wandering around camp alone, when Logan knew there were monsters lurking in the forest, worried him. He kicked his feet out of bed, dragging his blanket with him as he silently padded toward the door, opening it slowly. Logan spotted a shadow sitting on the porch, and he heaved a relieved sigh. Virgil started as someone sat down next to him, but relaxed when he heard the figure whisper, "Nightmares?" Virgil shook his head. Strangely enough, the nightmares that had plagued him for their entire journey hadn't been the thing to wake him up. To be fair, that was because he'd never gotten to sleep in the first place. "No, just too many thoughts. Couldn't sleep. I thought fresh air would help." He tugged his hoodie tighter around himself. It wasn't cold, exactly, but there was a chill in the early summer air. Logan reached out and rested his hand on Virgil's knee, smiling softly at his friend. "Mind sharing a few? Maybe I can help." Virgil sighed, taking Logan's hand and intertwining their fingers. It was selfish of him, he knew, to use Logan for physical affection when he didn't really understand himself what he wanted their relationship to be, but Logan never seemed to mind. He grounded Virgil, calm and controlled and always willing to lend an ear. "Just wondering if we're really safe here. We've been on the run for so long, Lo. Are we really done? Can we really fall asleep in this cabin without worrying about one of us staying awake to keep guard? It just feels too easy." Logan was silent for a moment, formulating his thoughts. I don't know if any place is truly safe, Virgil. And not just for us half-bloods either. There are any number of ways we could have died while on the streets. That can happen even as regular humans. Virgil opened his mouth to sarcastically thank Logan. Clearly that made things so much better. But Logan shifted closer to him, letting go of Virgil's hand to sling an arm around his shoulders, letting his other hand reach over and clasp Virgil's own. But there's safety in numbers, Virgil. And here, in this place, we can learn to protect ourselves from those who might want to hurt us. It's not perfect, no place is, but everyone here wants to make sure that we're safe. Logan's hand squeezed Virgil's shoulder, and he reached up to gently pull Virgil's chin so their eyes met. Virgil's heart stopped at the soft, loving look in Logan's eyes, and his gaze flickered down to Logan's lips as he whispered, "No matter what happens, Virgil, you can always count on me. I will be here for you, and I will protect you until the day I die." "Logan," Virgil breathed, voice shaking. He reached up and caressed Logan's cheek, brushing a stray strand of hair from his face. He wanted to tell Logan just how much he cared for him, how the thought of being without him made him want to sob. He wanted to, but he didn't trust his words. Instead, he leaned up and let his eyes flutter shut as their lips met. For a moment, he worried he overstepped a boundary when Logan froze, and he pulled away quickly, an apology falling from his lips. His fears were quickly whisked away as Logan's sleep-addled brain caught up, and he cupped Virgil's cheek, pulling him in for a longer kiss that made Virgil's head spin. Logan pulled away, resting his forehead against Virgil's. "Would you be able to sleep tonight if you weren't alone?" Virgil looked up at him, still on a high from the kiss. He knew he'd worry tomorrow what that meant, but tonight, he just wanted to not be alone. "Yes, please." Logan stood and pulled Virgil to his feet. They snuck back into the cabin, and Virgil happily curled up against Logan in the latter's bed. When their cabin mates woke in the morning, they quietly snickered at their unclaimed roommates and cursed everything they could think of that cell phones weren't allowed at camp. Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and if you like what you heard and you want to see more, you can find the link to the blog in the description. Feel free to reblog the one-shots and send in an ask or two. See you next time!